Hissong. Judy is the president of Nesso Strategies. Nesso is the Italian word for connection, and connecting strategies is Judy's passion. Her financial background pairs with her athletic mindset and her executive coach training as she partners with law firm professionals for strategic planning, leadership development, executive coaching, team building and training, conflict and communication skills. She has more than a decade of law firm leadership experience, giving her insiders understanding of the complexities of the business of law. Please join me in welcoming Judy Hissong.
So, just a few moments of technology. Turn this off. This on. How's our sound? We're good? Everybody can hear me? Excellent. So, it's interesting to think about what the trends are in our industry. And especially as I was coming today to speak to you about this, I had all kinds of ideas. And Monique and I talked about what in the world I would say and why I would bother saying it. And there are so many ways to identify trends. And I'm sure you all have lots of resources that you follow along as well. It's not about the trends, it's about what you do with them. That's the bottom line. Because anybody can read a trend line. You don't even have to have a CPA or an accounting degree or even like math to see a picture and know whether it's going up or down, right? So we have to go a little bit deeper than that to understand any of it. And as I thought more about what really is involved, the place that I want to start is to talk about the skill sets that we have as leaders and the opportunity we have as leaders. And so I stumbled upon this research 3 or 4 years ago now, and I'm still fascinated by it. So let's start with this question. Fortune 100 companies. A really nice abstract was written about the CEOs of Fortune 100 companies. Now for most of us that have retirement plans, we probably have some piece of a Fortune 100 company in your portfolio. Which means that at some level you trust the direction that company is going for your own financial future. So they set out to talk to the CEOs of these Fortune 100 companies to determine how their strategic thinking skills were, how good they were at developing the strategic direction of their organization. And they did it through some sort of analysis. You know, they have all of these psychometric tests that you've probably all done at some point in time or another. So they devised this thing to measure strategic thinking. And the idea was at the end of the analysis, they would go back to the CEOs and offer them some development plans as appropriate. So the CEOs were all in. Because let's face it, just like in our organization, all of our lawyers sign up right away to develop their personal skills, right? You get to a certain point and you feel like you don't have to. Look to the left, look to the right, and tell me that none of you in this room have ever said, I think I know everything I need to know about this topic, I'm not going to go listen today, to something, whatever it is. So 4% is the number. 4% of Fortune 100 CEOs are strategic thinkers. Now, before you pull out your phones and adjust your portfolios, imagine that if we have people at that level in our business world with really only 4% competence, how that translates into all of the other places that business happens. And so to me, our opportunity area is to first say, let me think about how I am as a strategic thinker. And we can start by saying, how many of you in here feel like, yeah, I got that one. Strategic thinking is my jam. I spend all day long there. Right. Because where do you spend all day long? Doing what's before you. And so our first opportunity area is to say, if we could get a little bit more strategic in our approach, what would happen in our organizations? What would the direction be that we could take it? From wherever we sit. And I'm not saying that you have the ultimate CEO power of a Fortune 100 company, but let's face it, if you're the president of, or the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, you probably don't know much about what's happening deep in your company anyway, because you're so removed. So strategic thinking as a skill set. Let's pick this apart a little bit and have you think about it. And I promise we're going to talk about industry stuff because we're going to talk about how we can apply the skills to it. The first one is to anticipate. Look beyond the line of sight. So 5 years from now, what's your firm going to look like? You're going to have the same practice areas? Are you still going to be billing by the hour? Oh. Are you going to have the same faces? The same titles? When we sit down and really think about 5 years from now, most of us can't get that far. So I've had occasion over the past month to spend about 24 hours with different lawyers in different firms to talk about their strategic plans and the direction they're going. And my questions were sent to them in advance of the meeting, before we ever got together. And one of the questions was, what's your vision for this firm? Where do you see this firm in 5 years? And at least 80% of them, when I asked them that question in person, said, I don't know. To which then we started a conversation, and they could identify it. But how many of you set aside, how many of you on your calendars on Friday, it's coming up, Friday, a few days away, you have 30 minutes of strategic thinking time? Well, where are you going? How are you going to get there if you're not thinking about it now? So get together with your management committee, let's say, or even your managers. And are you solving current problems or anticipating what's not yet known? And what we've developed over time is this really lovely reaction to whatever's happening in the marketplace. And we react and we react and we react, and pretty soon we are so good at reacting, it's like the overdeveloped muscle. That's the only one I want to work. Right? It's the only one I want to work. And in this way, where we start to get more strategic in our thinking, and we're going to anticipate beyond our line of sight, we have to take in information from more than our inner circle. So it's time for us to build networks in other industries, in other businesses, in places where what they're doing could inform what we do. So I've been speaking now, my goodness, for 15 years in different capacities. My first time out of the box, I'd spent a lot of time talking about health and wellness and well-being and stress management and how to take care of ourselves so that we can do what we do. And fast forward a long way, and I'm still talking about how we can take care of ourselves to do what we do. The game has amped up. I've been a speaker on the what was formerly known as the essential competencies of legal administrators, is now known as how horrible is that? Law Firm Management Essentials, LFME. When I first started speaking there, the demographic generally was 60 to 70% homegrown. What that means is they promoted up in their existing firms. I'm going to be speaking there next month. The demographic is 60 to 70% external hire with some other business background. So in this one snapshot of a minute, can you see where the industry is going? It's going into more business orientation. It's going away from do as we've always done, because we can't. So, true confession. I put a quote on the top of your handout that I cannot attribute, because I am one of the world's worst ever at finding something and clipping it out on some kind of way which has no attribution to even where I read it. That's horrible. And so I've Google searched this thing 1,000 times and still can't find the person. So if you're in this room, please raise your hand, take full credit. But I think this is a really applicable statement. The future isn't the practice of law. The future is the delivery of legal services. And lawyers aren't going to be the only ones providing them. Now, that's kind of like saying the billable hours going away. It's not going to happen today. Nobody's going to panic right now. What I am saying is that there's an opportunity if you choose it. If you choose it. And so once we get past the notion of our our strategic thinking, we're going to anticipate. The next piece of it is our critical thinking. And Lord knows this industry's got great critical thinkers. They're trained. Law school trains them. And what happens when you work for them? Well, you get trained too. Right? Why not? Here's the trouble. When we define critical thinking as let me pick apart every little thing, that's a different kind of thing than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the critical thinking that starts with questioning my point of view, not yours. So I sat in a meeting, compensation committee meeting with the law firm last week. It was a delightful conversation because every time I brought up a question, somebody had an answer why that wasn't a thing. Sit down. What are you talking about? You can't be saying that. Not to us. That won't work here. And I'm like, oh, you're an excellent critical thinker. So if that keeps not working here, how long before your firm's not here? No, it's okay. I'll wait. You think. I let the gentleman think. He's quick to jump in, but I want him to have a different kind of skill. I want him to question his own point of view. I want you to question your own point of view. Because what happens in the meantime is we uncover our bias and we uncover any manipulations that we might have. And we have them. Can we be real about that? We have them, right? So I spoke in National Harbor in May about inclusion and all that stuff. I'm not going down that road today. What I do want to say is if you don't have a strong strategy in diversity and inclusion, you better find one because your clients do. And this is a big piece of an opportunity area. Firms that get on that bandwagon early and often are going to be dominant in the RFP world. Maybe you already are. Good for you. And in this way where we're talking about strategic thinking, we're talking very specifically about your skill set. This is your opportunity to question your own point of view and to recognize, hey, there might be some bias here. We might be manipulating here. So who in here is in charge of numbers? What I do every day is number stuff. Number people. So how many different ways can I tell a story with numbers? I like to answer that as many different partners as I have. Right? Because they're all going to look at the numbers through their own framework. And if it doesn't tell them the way they wanted to tell them, what do they say? Can you run a report that, right? Which is totally fine. It's a matter of understanding that. Here we are. Now let's uncover what we're going after. What's the bias that we're demonstrating? And is that what we want? Let's be critical thinkers in a different framework. Because ultimately, what we want to do is to be able to interpret. We want to take what we have and build solutions. We want to identify problems and look toward how we solve them. Anybody else in here excellent at identifying problems? I'm an expert. Number one. I can point out a problem in a minute. Even when I don't have a solution, I like to go in and say I do. Right. How about you? I spend a lot of time on Delta Airlines. I'm grateful for them. They take very good care of me. I go in their clubs in certain airports to get out of the fray, to not charge you meals because I can eat there. And I said to them, I got a great idea. I totally think you need to do this because I know I'm solving a problem for you. I think every time I go in your Sky Club, you should give me a big bottle of water. Then I don't have to go stand in line and buy one at the store. And I can take it on the plane with me. That's a great idea, right? Anybody else on board? I'm like, you should give me a bottle of water. You know how much I paid for my ticket? Just give me the bottle. Why don't you pour me a little cup? Hand it to me. Done. Next, right? Just give me a bottle of water. Well, they can't. Because they have a relationship with airport concessions, which allows all those companies to sell water at like 16 times the price at the supermarket, right? But they're in contractual arrangement that they can't. But dang it, I had a solution to your problem. You didn't, dang it, right? If I had gone about it differently, if I had said, let's talk about all the problems that we have from the minute we get out of whatever got us to the airport until we get to our destination, which of those are significant to us that we could solve? From the minute your client has a legal issue until they get it resolved, where are all the things that are issues for them? And if we can start talking about it through the client lens and start identifying and interpreting information through that lens, we have a different approach. We have a different approach. So, as I get more clear about what I want to do with my strategic thinking, I start different dialogue. I start different dialogue. And in starting different dialogue, I also help other people be better strategic thinkers. Because whether you like it or not, those of you in this room are influencers in your firm, and you're going to leave here, and if you don't talk about any of this stuff, then nobody else knows it. If you go back and you talk about it, other people start to get talking about it too, and pretty soon you have some momentum, some traction to do something differently. Because after we get done interpreting, we have to create some alignment. Anybody in here have a great idea that's never been in play? You know, we came out with a strategic planning committee, came out with a whole plan, and we've done a thing. Right? Because we don't go about the business of creating alignment, we assume that by virtue of the conversation and the consensus we built that everybody's on board, and everybody is on board, but everybody isn't somebody. And if we don't have a somebody in charge, nothing gets done. And for most of us, we can't be a somebody on our own. We need some sort of action group that will help move things forward. So that takes us to about 2008. So here's some fascinating, maybe not, maybe it's just me. I think you'll be interested to know this. We cruised along for a long time as an industry. We cruised along for a long time because things were good. There was no reason to do it differently. It was totally awesome. Those typewriters worked. Every once in a while you'd have to have someone out, get some new carbon paper. It was totally awesome. A fax would come in. We'd go home for the weekend. If there weren't any faxes, we might come by Saturday morning for a few hours and deal with it. But after that, we were out till Monday. And if you don't remember those days, good for you, but they were a day. Right? So here we are now, and we're still operating like, oh, we just do what comes in. But now it comes in all the time, in many different forms. So it's on us that we are 24/7 workers, not on our clients. They're demanding, because we allow them, relationship building and all that. So back up in time. I promise it's not a history lesson, especially not about typewriters. Here's what's interesting. Between 1995 and 2007, the price of legal services went up 95%. Wow. And you wonder why those were the good years. And if I'm a client in that window of time, I just paid the rate because that's what I did. I paid the rate. You were my trusted advisor, therefore your rate must be the right rate. Well, we all know what happened in 2007. Do we need to revisit that? Everybody's good there? Need a refresher real quick? Okay, done. So what happened after that? All of a sudden we went, we got to trim the fat, we got to get lean, we got to up our ratios, we got to make sure we're doing the things that will make us the most amount of money in the current environment. And so we right-sized, downsized, adjusted, or are really proud that we did nothing. Somewhere in there you all were, right? And I'm not saying that there's one good or one bad. What I'm saying is in that moment we had a very serious demarcation. So pause there. Let's go back in time. The one thing that's been consistent about the legal industry as long as we've tracked economic index is that our industry paces with our economy. So we have a good economy, profits per partner, huge, nice, sweet. We have a bad economy, partners per profit, 2%, kind of bad by our terms, but not nearly as bad as the economy was itself. Well, something happened in 2007 and 2008. I don't know what it was. I still haven't figured it out. I'm not an economist. But we're not that anymore. Because the economy's good and our industry isn't good. And I don't know what's going to happen when our economy's bad. It'll happen someday. Not wishing that on anybody. It'll just happen. It's due course. The economy's good, and right now what we know as an industry, about a third of firms are doing good, about a third of firms are very flat, and about a third of firms are not doing well at all. This is the first time. We've never had this situation. We've always, the economy's good, we're always good, 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 trend line. So if you feel chaos, if it feels like you stepped out of your range, if it feels like a nervous time to you, and you can't figure out why, it's the underpinning that it's really different than it's ever been. And you have chosen an industry that is very risk adverse. You know this, right? We are super risk adverse, which is why our transactional people push the buttons of our litigators, because our litigators are all about managing risk, and our transactional people are all about building the next big thing that might not be known yet. And so we have a conflict of risk, and then it turns inward toward what we're doing as a firm, and it causes some chaos. But that's not the point of chaos. It's really about this notion that we are not earning what we used to earn when the economy was good, and we don't know why. It's always been, it should always be. So there's your history lesson, and that catches us up. And as we got into 2010 and we said, boy, oh boy, we got to do something different. We got to figure this out. We can't just keep upping rates. Anybody up in here agree with this? Anybody disagree with this? No, we've been able to up our rates every year. It's been fine, totally fine. Okay, I'm waiting because I know there's somebody who must have that experience. I just haven't met him yet. And in this way where we can't just continue to raise our rates, we have to think about this differently, right? Well, right about this time enters a little organization called CLOC. Anybody know what CLOC is? Yeah, Catherine, what's CLOC?
Corporate Legal Operations Consortium.
Yes, Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, which is a very fancy name for what? We're going to figure out how to do this really well. Right. We're going to get together, all of us that are in corporations, we're going to get together in the legal operations arena and improve our processes and improve our services and really control our costs, which is the magic words that a law firm never wants to hear, right? Never. So what happened with CLOC, and by the way, one of the things that still confuses me to this day, I believe CLOC has had 2 or 3 annual conferences. So the people who are running legal departments in corporations are getting together 2 or 3 times a year. And law firms pay a ton of money to get in front of corporate counsel at the ACC. But they're not going to the CLOC conference. Anybody else puzzled by that? It's like open season for connection and identification of all the people that are doing, way to get to know your clients at a very entry level, but it may not be the attorney that goes, so we don't want to participate? What if you in here as business people went and learned about the businesses of your clients? Plus or minus for the relationship with the client?
Plus.
So how can we sell that? That might be the only thing you leave here with today. And if you don't serve corporations, we got other stuff for you. Skip that one. Right? So what did CLOC do? CLOC got together and said, man, we're spending a lot of money for outside counsel. In fact, in 1997, the cost of an outside counsel exceeded in-house counsel by about $270,000. That was nothing, because in 2016, the cost of outside counsel exceeded having in-house counsel by $420,000. So if I'm in legal operations, if I'm a general counsel and I'm looking around and saying, my goodness, look at how much money we're spending, we could spend $420,000 less by doing this in-house, what am I going to do? I'm going to go cherry pick some good lawyers from law firms and I'm going to fill up my staff. And now about 61% of every dollar is done in-house. Those of you that are very focused on corporate clients, what's going on for you? But you're tooth and nail, you're knockdown drag out. You need boxing gloves because you aren't competing for many less dollars. So let's fast forward that conversation for a second and say, okay, so what CLOC's doing is really getting operationally efficient, but they're maxed. It's like me sitting down with you and saying, there's a point in time in which you will make the most amount of money per partner. And then you will cross over and you will need a little bit more time before you will make the most amount per partner. So if you're 10 or under, you're in a sweet spot. But if you're 18, it's kind of a weird size. You know, if you're 21, it's kind of a weird size. You get to 30, now your profits per partner go up. It's all economies of scale. Not going into all that today. I'm sure you know this anyway if you're the one doing any kind of analysis for your firm. The point is that the corporate counsels are at their max, which means they're done or pretty close to it. Now there's a trend line here too, which says over time we tend to hire and then let go in-house counsel. There's a trend line here. Comes in, goes out, comes in, goes out. If you've been around a while, you know this. That's not that big of a deal. What's important about that trend line is that it hasn't worked lately. And we have the additional component of ASPs, which are alternative service providers. Thank you, Catherine. Alternative service providers. So what the heck is that? Well, those are people that are delivering legal solutions that don't have to be lawyers. And so they're delivering legal solutions in innovative ways. How are we innovative? Axiom Law. Heard of them? Check them out if you haven't. Axiom Law. Started in the year 2000. Virtual law firm. Global firm. Virtual. In 2015, they crossed the $250 million mark in revenue. So I can't even get my head around that. Somebody smarter than me. In 15 years, your revenue went from 0 to 250 million. What's that rate of growth? And do you even want to know, right? So Axiom is a big player. I bet there's something in Houston that's a local player. And I'm not talking about LegalZoom, because obviously they've been around and they are an alternative service provider. But you know, if there's nothing else, I think we've got a bigger mark on our backs. than we've ever had. Because what's happening in the big four accounting firms is they figured out that they ought to be offering legal services too. You know, if we're out there doing all this corporate tax work, why don't we have a tax attorney that we can bundle into our offerings for our clients? Now, why are CPAs thinking of that and law firms aren't thinking about it the other way around? Well, because we can't. We can't have partners who aren't lawyers. We know this. So therefore, let's just forget the whole idea. Hold on. Let's go back to anticipate, innovate, critically thinking. What can we do and how could we do it? Are we looking at the ways in which a CPA firm, Ernst & Young, is going to employ M&A lawyers? They're going to employ labor and employment lawyers. They're going to say, what are all the ways we can ultimately serve our clients? How often do we sit down and say, what are all the ways we can ultimately serve our clients? Not just in practicing law. So I have an insurance defense client who, first off, their first reaction was, how dare you review my bills? Anybody else going through this? How dare you look at what I'm writing down and judge it? How dare you? And then they said, you know what? We realized we probably weren't doing the very best job we could do of budgeting and the very best job we could do of tracking. And so this little tiny law firm is now in the business of selling software to other law firms that will help them budget and track insurance defense work. They let go of the notion that they're never going to be able to bill a higher rate for insurance defense work and said, I think we can be leading the industry by creating a software package that links to any time and billing software that every time you print out a bill for a client, it shows exactly where you're at with budget. And you can run that internally and know at any moment in time if you need to ask for more or whatever. And you can slice and dice it any way you want. They got well past providing legal services, now they're providing legal solutions. So it's been a year, they only have 4 insurance companies on board. What? That's amazing. So it's in this place where when we think about alternative service providers, it's up to us to say, where does that fit in our business? Not how can we work around that. It's a different way of thinking about it. They are for sure. 68% of in-house counsel are using alternative service providers. They are for sure a competitor. And let me add in there the reality that Deloitte said by the year 2020, 30% of our revenue is going to come from sources not yet known. Now that's from a 2017 report. So in 3 years, each year they're going to up 10% over their previous year in an area they haven't yet identified. How many of you have a strategic plan that identifies something that you're going to build toward and implement in the next 3 years that you don't have right now? Excellent. It's rare. What that tells me is it's an opportunity area. It's an opportunity area for us to have a conversation to differentiate ourselves. And at the end of the day, anything I'm saying here can be heard as an opportunity. It's a way in which you can differentiate yourselves if you choose. The market is ripe for picking. It's a completely different ballgame. We used to think, hey, that person's been with this firm forever. That client's been with us forever. And now what happens? They're having different relationships. They're not giving you all their work. They feel like that's too high risk for them because they came in and said, we're getting together as a legal operation and we're doing business. Anybody else in here have the experience of saying, you know what, we are a business, not just a law firm, and hearing the answer, we practice law. Right? I remember being part of that conversation. Again, that's a very historical reference from a long time ago. I remember being part of that conversation and saying, well, if we're not a business, what are we? Because we like to make money. So now we start to get into the space of really looking at business as an opportunity. And that means we have to look at our clients as revenue sources, as partners. So bring this home to ALA for a second. And we appreciate it, and I very much appreciate it. I wouldn't be here but for you guys. So thanks so much for your sponsorship. We know we're in partnership with them. We create ways to relate to them. Do we create ways to relate to our clients? And in the creation of those events, are we intentional about what we're looking to do there? No, today we don't want to talk business at all. We just want to talk about personal lives. So if we cross over and focus on what our clients want, they probably want some metrics. They probably want to look at how it is that we're staffing things. Are we offering that to them even if they're not asking? Are we doing what we can do to educate them about the things we know? Are we doing what we can do to educate ourselves about the things that they know? So some of you might call this client interviews. How many of you do client interviews in your firm? Awesome. So client interviews is really a way for us to have conversation with our clients about how well they're doing, how well we're doing for them. What are the opportunity areas? And again, this comes back to this notion, strategic thinking. A big part of strategic thinking is learning, which means I'm open to feedback. I'm sure you have a lot of partner feedback programs. I'm sure that once a year all of your partners get feedback from each other, because that would be a good business decision, right? You would all sit down and say, hey, we're all business owners, let's offer each other some feedback. That would be an excellent step. But most law firms aren't willing to tolerate it. Again, we've got 4% of the world's, of the top 100 CEOs willing to strategically think, which means willing to sit down with feedback and actually do something with it. Willing to learn and say, hey, can I be agile? I have yet to see a law firm value set that agile is one of their core values. Well, what would it be like if it was? Ooh. So in thinking about what we're doing, what our differentiation opportunities are, what we're doing with our clients, it's really coming back to a lot of measurement and metric. How are we providing them information that's of value to them? And when we're in relationship with them, how are we developing the relationship so that they understand we understand their business, whatever their business is? And if you're in a very personal situation, personal law, we'll say, trust in estates, very personal law, then it means understanding their fears at a personal level. And if you're in a very corporate climate and you're doing corporate, let's say bankruptcy, then it means understanding their fears from a business perspective. But if we're not having a relationship to understand that aspect of it, we're missing an opportunity. And that's where client interviews come in. I'm not selling you on them, I'm saying check them out. And if you've got somebody who's done them, that's what ALA is all about. Network in and find out how they did it and what they learned from it. But the biggest piece that comes out of client interviews in general, or the hurdle to overcome, is I'm afraid of what they'll say. Okay? I'm afraid of what our clients would say about us. We might not like to hear it. You're right, you might. What happens if you don't offer someone information that they might not want to hear? Well, I'll say it this way. I bought a Subaru 2 years ago now because they're supposed to be one of the best cars on the road. And by the way, I drive probably 4,000 miles a year. So it's probably my last car. That's the way I looked at it. I wanted something that would last, sturdy, all that. Great reviews all the way around. Totally my mistake. One thing I never checked. Performance of the service. Performance of the maintenance. So one of the things that was important to me is that I could make an appointment. I wanted an appointment, drop my car off, have it served, be able to come back to it. I didn't want to have to go wait all day for an oil change, that kind of thing, right? So it was important to me. So when I bought the car, they said, oh yeah, absolutely, you make appointments. Here's the portal, we'll show you all that stuff. Excellent. Great. Never checked on what the reviews were. Never checked. Now, I guess it's 3 years ago now. I'm in my third year of owning a car which I absolutely cannot stand to take to the dealer for service. It's the bane of my existence. I would never tell anyone to buy that car. But I've never walked into their general manager and say, hey, I want to sit down with you and talk to you about my experience either. Now, I've left notes on paperwork I've had to sign. I've talked to my direct supervising person, service person. I don't even know the title. I've explained myself, to which I have gotten defended. Anybody else know how to defend? I'm good at it too. I was late because, and as soon as I put in a because, I'm not really owning being late, right? So in this way, I don't offer the feedback, I just leave. If you don't make it easy for me to give feedback, I just leave. Well, eventually I got a call from the general manager. He said, hey, we've seen a theme. I've been brought your name. I said, oh, you think it was the time that I went in because my windshield wiper broke and when you fixed it, it did this instead of this? Was it that time? Serious. He said, well, yeah, actually, it kind of was that time. So yeah, I was pretty loud. I was pretty loud in your dealership that day because the fact I had to come back and hear somebody's excuse about it did not make me feel valued. And he said, well, I want you to feel valued. I said, then you need to fix whatever's going on over there and put the appointments back that you promised me. Period. But if he hadn't asked, I wouldn't have shared. and now I make an appointment, and I still hate it because I got residual grudge, right? But in that way where I was able to have the conversation, I have a lot more respect because that took a lot. Your clients want to share with you. They want you to understand. They create an opportunity for you. And by the way, if you hear something that you can't do anything about, then you have to be really human and say, I can't do anything about it. And that's okay too. It's in that dialogue. And I'll say this, we have this interesting, it's so fascinating to be alive right now. Anybody else feel this way? I'm fascinated to be alive right now. So I just got forced into getting a new phone, which really means I dropped it too many times, right? Got forced into getting a new phone, and now my phone recognizes my face and opens up. Anybody else having this trippy moment in time? Like sometimes I make faces at it just to see if it still knows it's my face. But it does. It's scary all the same. With sunglasses on, with a hat on, it just always knows my face. Very weird. It's an interesting time to be alive. Well, here we are in this other really fascinating thing, which is we have this huge population that are retiring at 10,000 people a day. And almost identical in number is this huge population that doesn't have a lot of experience in the workforce yet. And then sandwiched between these two, we have this relatively small group in the middle that has the experience, but there just aren't enough of them. And we're in this really interesting time because what we as an industry do typically is as a partner goes away and another partner comes in. A partner goes away and another partner comes in. But yet we know statistically, because people report this, about 50% of equity partners don't have enough work right now. So why do we want more of them? This is what we've always done? Is that really what makes the most sense? Are we thinking strategically about that? I don't know. Even bigger question, there aren't enough of them. Even if you one for one and you put a Generation Xer into every partnership role, you've only got half your numbers covered. So we need to, and I can't believe I even have to say this because this is a problem that's a decade old, think about succession as being this group and this group some of the time. And how much attention are we giving this group on getting the skills they need to be in this group? So if we have people that are coming up and growing, and by the way, our first generation of people learning without a book is now in play, right? People learning entirely through a screen is now in play. I challenge you to think about how much of what you learned was through the words of a book versus the time you spent on the playground with another person. I challenge you to think about the skills that you bring right now to work every day, how much of them were learned in a book and how much of them were learned by interaction. And so I'm telling you, we have a problem, and it's almost here, which we will have an entire generation arriving in the workforce without really any deep experience in relating to other people. Think about it. How many of you have hired someone, it's their very first job, and they're out of college? How many of you have that person in your house? Okay? How many of you were that person? Because most of us in this generation, or this generation, started working much younger. So we were forced into interaction much younger. Now if I work younger, I can work from my home through a screen. And yet we're in an industry that's very specific to people skills as we relate to clients. We may never see them, but we need to talk to them to get information from them. This is an important skill set that has to be incorporated in. So we have this really large dynamic, 10,000 people a day that are going away. Have we created plans? Do they have succession plans in play? Do we know what their timing is? Well, we don't want to say too much because we certainly don't want to push them out. But we want to know where their clients are going to go when they're done. How many of you have a mandatory retirement age for your partners? Anybody? So mandatory retirement age in several firms is 70. And that doesn't mean you have to go away. That means you move from partner to of counsel. It doesn't mean you leave the firm. It means that you step away from your responsibilities as an owner and you become a contributor at a different level. Well, that's a very different kind of language, isn't it? You're 70, you're retired, get out. You're 70, what we need is your expertise over here in really helping develop a whole generation of people that need to know how to develop relationship. Completely different conversation. right? So we don't have a mandatory retirement age. What happens when our clients look at our lawyer? I have a client who's 84. He's the managing partner of his firm. He's always been the managing partner of his firm. He's 84. He's not going anywhere at all. How old do you think his clients are? 84. That's right. And they are heads of really, really great big companies who are doing what? I'm not going to be here forever. Here's the guy who's my successor. I want to start incorporating that person into every one of our meetings. And I'm over here, and I'm 84, and I'm just me, because I'm going to be here forever, and you should trust me, because I'm the relationship guy. And by the way, if you don't trust me, I probably don't get compensated the same, because that's how my compensation system works in my firm. So you need to trust me. When you don't see me doing anything about succession, and you're having a conversation over here, the chances of you looking elsewhere for counsel go up infinitely. Hence the need for succession planning. Well, here's the trouble. How many of you have associate development plans? You're an associate, you're in year 1, we expect this, you're in year 2, year 3, we got a development plan for you. And generally it's about lawyering skills. I would love it if there was more about people skills in there. We'll rant on that in a few minutes. For right now, the problem is we have associate development plans, or better yet, let's call it associate reviews. We do associate reviews, and when do they stop? As soon as they become a partner. One of the reasons to become a partner is nobody can any longer tell you how good or bad you are, ever again. Your clients do, but you may not share that, right? Yeah. So I come up through the ranks with a plan. I become a partner. I don't have to plan anymore. So why would I continue to grow that skill in my brain of planning if it's not something that you're asking of me, if it's not good? Any of you that have friends, family, or other relationships with anybody in a corporate environment, they will tell you every year they have a development plan that they have to create and submit and adhere to as they grow through the year. So what happened to us? So as we continue to move toward being more of a business, here's an opportunity area. Because here's the reasoning. Okay, maybe we don't need the partner to ever have a plan. We're going to develop our associates with a plan. You're going to be a partner for however long you're a partner. And oh, by the way, when you get within 5 years of retirement, now we want you to go back to having a plan because we want to know how we're going to have succession for all these clients. Yeah. So you've been practicing law, let's just say 30 years. That's probably on the low side after you become a partner. And all of a sudden I'm going to tell you now you have to make a plan. That's going to go over well, right? Think about it for yourselves. If you don't write your own development plan right now, and I said, beginning next year, we're all going to do development plans. How are you going to react to that? Oh, nothing changes around here anyway. There's no reason. Nobody will track it. Nobody will care if I do it. Any of those responses that might run through your head are going to run through their heads too. So we can't just do it in the abstract. We have to then build in the places and say, hey, our management committee, or however we run our firm, is now going to check in on these development plans as we go along. And when you're a partner, your development plan may be called a marketing plan. It doesn't matter to me what you call it. It's about how are we going to continue to develop the skills beyond being a lawyer, because we know we have CLEs for that, right? Yeah. How many CLMs are here? Yeah. So I have been given the incredible gift, thank you, Catherine and squad, of speaking at the regional conferences at 8 a.m. on Friday morning on ethics. So those of you that need CLM renewal credit, come take a nap during the ethics. Which is a lot like asking our lawyers to learn from a static environment of a CLE, right? It's really about how can we make things more interactive in general. And having a development plan of any kind creates a different level of accountability. And let me just go on that for a second. How many of you think you have a highly accountable workforce right now? People show up every day, they do exactly what they say they're going to do, and you get more from them than you've ever gotten. See, I would say that the biggest trouble we have in this country, and this is me being strategic thinking beyond anything in our industry, if there's an opportunity area to differentiate yourselves, it's to create an accountable workforce. Our employee engagement levels are down around 35%. Why? Because there's no accountability. And so the fascinating thing is, I want to hold you accountable. That's not how it works. That's how we think it works. We think we throw out a standard and you should adhere to it, and now I'm going to hold you to it. But in reality, it's throwing out a standard and talking about how it's going to work for everybody and what we're all going to do about it. Because if we don't get together on it, it's not really accountability, it's crime and punishment. And we're fantastic at that, right? So I was in New England, talking with a firm in that area of the country, having a small conversation about the Patriots, because you're going to have to. Was talking about the whole Deflategate situation, right? So anybody in here need a brief explanation of what I'm talking about? Okay, so the whole Deflategate thing where there's a Super Bowl and there's a football that's not inflated enough, and how Tom Brady got fined and penalized and blah, 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 right? Now, I informed this person I'm not a Patriot fan. I will tell you all, I'm an underdog fan. Give me an underdog, I'm a fan. Well, that automatically caused some inflammation, as you might imagine. But I'm okay with that. So we continue the conversation, and I say, here's the thing I want to know from you. You're a Patriot fan. How long have you been a fan? Oh, your whole life. Excellent. So you'll know the answer to this. Why is it that Tom Brady's the one who got punished when there's another fella on the field who touches at least as many balls as he does? Because he hands him the ball every time he says hike. What's his name? You're a lifelong fan. What's his name? Well, I don't know. Oh. So we just want to establish a crime and a punishment and hold Tom Brady accountable when there's at least one other fella who touched every single ball that he touched. But we don't even know his name. This is a great example of how we've got accountability done wrong. It's really thinking about if we want to grow an accountable workforce, we want to put in place development plans, then we have to be partners in those planning processes so people know what to expect. In other words, it can't just be 5 years from retirement, you need to tell us what's going to happen with your clients. It also needs to be 5 years in, we want you to have these skills. And where we think you're deficient, we have a plan for that. How many of you have budgets for business development? And how many of your lawyers have budgets of their own for business development? What if their budgets were split into learning and doing? So you have this much money you can spend on doing business development. You have this much money you can spend on learning more about business development. Or dare I say leadership, which is really what I think it takes. What if we split and had two things running instead of just, here's all the money you can spend to go do things. Go do them. Is there anybody in this room that thinks every lawyer in their firm ought to be out doing? Because I think there are some lawyers that are really, really very well suited to stay in place, put their head down, and research and write. Okay? Somebody asked me this, well, Judy, do you think the best use of me is to develop my speaking skills? No, actually, because I've been talking with you for 30 minutes and we haven't made eye contact yet. And I think you can do a disservice by having the wrong people in front of a room. So I'm not suggesting that every person has to have the same path. But if we had a learning budget and a doing budget, come up with something more clever than that, please. Right? In a way in which we advance their skills interpersonally, in a way in which we measure their success in the world, we've just shifted the game. Because I don't know anybody who's paying attention like that. And at the end of the day, we know we need people in our firms who are making rain. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is our highest rainmakers play managing partner, or play executive committee member, or whatever. Because they obviously know business, they went out and generated it. I'm a math geek and I don't get that equation. I don't get that equation. So the managing partner role has got all these added responsibilities which are completely different than generating business. And yet we somehow link them. Do we even sit down and say, we have a term limit for our managing partner? Maybe not. There's no CEO limit on Fortune 100 companies or whatever, pick your size company. There's not a term limit on that job. But how often do they turn over? 5 to 7 usually. So when we come in-house and we have no defined period of time, that's cool as long as we keep innovating, we keep moving. But what happens over time when my job is to go out there and build time and build a business, and my volunteer role is to run a firm, I get tired. So am I so interested in ideas after 5 or 7 years? And by the way, I'm 5 to 7 years further down my practice path. Now maybe even I'm closer to the end than the beginning. Now I'm even more even more unwilling to take risks than I was at the beginning. So it's in all of these things where our opportunity area, to me, the advantage we have, the distinction that we could make, the differentiator in our equation is to say we are a business, and as a business, here are the things we need for the next 5 years to really guide us. We need to be focused on developing talent because we've got great talent, but we're not seeing what we want to see from them. So who's the right person to lead us into that regard? Who's the person who's got really the excellent skills of developing relationships and rapport that people will want to be around for that time? Change the gears. Well, actually, let me say this. When I say who, I don't mean a name and a face. I don't mean, oh, right here, she's right here, this person. No, I mean, what are the strengths? What are the skills? Set aside the names and faces because that's where we go. If we're really going to get strategic in our thinking, we have to be willing to look at things as values and behaviors. What are the skills that are going to get us there? Now we can start talking about, oh wow, so our next managing partner is probably going to need to make some really hard decisions, which by the way is part of strategic thinking. If they're going to make some really hard decisions, who's the person we've got that's good at that right now? Ooh, we got nobody. Well, excellent. You've got 3 years to start teaching those skills. Let's go. How do we teach them? You know, this is the anticipate beyond current sight. And if right now in your firm you have nobody who's good at difficult conversations, I am not stunned at all. Because that is a skill that we don't often cultivate. It's a very difficult thing to not be liked. It's a very difficult thing. So as we go into this and we say, hey, instead of looking at it just like who's next, or who's the sucker willing, if we actually say, here's the skills that we actually want to see in the role, now we don't have those skills, how can we cultivate them? Who's the closest to it? How do we develop them? That's on you guys. See, here's the thing. There's no doubt in my mind, and I've been in this industry a long time, that you as legal administrators, in whatever title you have, are influencing all the time. The question is, are you doing it intentionally? Hey, here's the skill that I think we need as a management team, and I bring that skill. So let me help others get that skill. Or I don't have that skill, how can I go get it? Where can I practice it? Well, I call that ALA service. You're all in the equal opportunity to be a member of this chapter in a way in which serves at a higher level. Committee, board. Heck, you could go to the ALA Parent International Association and serve somewhere. To try it out, to practice it. Because it's really on us to think about what's coming next. How many of you have active mentoring programs in your firms? Pay attention, get there if you're not. That active mentoring piece is really critical. So let me explain this for a second. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. What we've identified as a millennial population is a different and unique subset, which we all were when we were in that particular age. So set aside that they're somehow separate. You were too. Instead, think about this. This is the first population in the history of our country that comes predominantly between 60 and 70%, predominantly from split homes. Never before in our history have we had that. So we are talking about people who have been influenced by 4, 6, 8 adults instead of 2. Therefore, they are accustomed to having 4, 6, or 8 adults manage their lives. And you want them to manage their own. Or aren't you evil incarnate? Right? So for us to think about them differently means that we have to come in and first show them that there's benefit for them. We got to get off crime and punishment and talk to them about accountability as a measure of success for their own careers. For their own careers. Which gets us past where we're at with it. The mentoring programs that I'm talking about are ones where we don't necessarily go high to low, where we mix it up in the middle so we can create conversations. Some of that happens if you have associate lunches and you just let the associates loose on their own, as scary as that is, right? It happens by virtue of them starting to understand how to relate to other people and occasionally throw in a topic and say, here's today's topic, and let them chew on it, let them explore it. And if you're in this room and you think you're somewhere inside of 10 years from retirement, any of this stuff you can start with your own succession plan. Or if you're in this room and you're within 10 years of thinking you're going to promote yourself some kind of which way, either inside your current organization or you're going to go somewhere else. Time for your own succession plan. See, the thing about succession plan is it doesn't have to be named and spoken and said. It can be developed all the time. And I want to go back and touch on this notion of how we've got a problem that we need to solve, because our senior partners who are compensated for the very thing we want them to give up is a problem, right? How do we solve it? We have to look at our compensation differently in our final years of practice. We have to think about, is there an opportunity here to freeze what you're making, and you get to continue to make the frozen tundra, whatever that is, for the last 3 years, as long as we see a succession happening, as long as we see the transition of the work happening, not a decline. One idea. You're smart people. You can come up with a better one. But in this way in which we compensate only in this one area, or predominantly, I should say, the majority of the partners or the owners of your organizations take home money because they generate work and do work, we have to come up with a solution to incentivize them to give that away so that it stays in the firm and those skills starting to get trained. Now, I say 3 years because I think we might be able to have a taste for that right now. Would I rather it be longer? I think it will have to be at some point. It will have to be. So here's the biggest differentiator. If you and your firm go out there today and you spend time understanding your clients' needs and you focus on how you can build better relationships with them, and then you come home back to your firm and you say, hey guys, here's some things that we could really do better. You know, if we really focus on understanding, here's what I learned that they're doing in legal operations. They are so far ahead of us in how they record and bill us. They're looking for these things. Do we have a diverse enough workforce to meet the criteria for this RFP? If not, what are we doing about it? Because it's not, diversity is not a stamp, right? Do we have a diverse enough workforce to staff matters at all levels? Because we can't charge everything at a partner rate. So what happened in 2007, 2008, we froze. We froze everything. And unfortunately, that created a little gap in talent. Maybe you don't have it. I don't know. Look at your workforce. You see for yourselves. If you have that little gap in talent, then you're trying to fill that all the time, either from below or above, which is causing some concern in your clients. It's okay to be honest about it. You're not going to fill that gap. It's too small. So what can we do instead? So I've talked a bunch. I've thrown a bunch of seeds in. Haven't given you even a minute for questions. So I want to pause for just a second and see if what's rolling around in your heads, what questions are evoked, what impossibilities have shown up, if anything. So it was a good nap. So here's the piece. If we're really going to be accountable, we have to have action items. We have to have action items. And so I've talked a lot. What's your action item? And you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell anybody here today. But if you tell somebody, here's the one thing I'm going to do, the one thing I'm going to explore, the one thing I want to talk about more, the chances of it happening double. That's the way our brains work. So if you leave here and it was a great lunch and you go back and do what you've always done, I hope I see you again. But if we leave here and we take one small step, the certainty of us going in the direction in which we want to go is amplified. At a time in which we are more competitive than ever, the amplification is a huge differentiator. So I encourage you to pause long enough before you get up and book back to wherever you're booking, to make note in whatever way. I know you all have phones, so there's at least one way, right? To make note in whatever way makes sense to you that this is the piece that I want to carry from here forward. Thank you. You've been riveted. Or asleep, I'm not sure. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been great to see you all. And go change the world, would you? Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you very much, Judy. We really appreciate it. And you know we put you at 8 o'clock in the morning because that way we could get more people to show up at 8 o'clock. You're always a great job. Sorry about that.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
I wasn't complaining.
Okay, be sure to turn in your name badges.